I'd like you to take a moment and think about children and youth. And there's so many youth in this audience, which truly makes the day even more exciting and more valuable. As you're thinking about children and youth, think about a child who's in prison because they've committed a crime. Think about a child who is taking drugs, shooting heroin, is addicted to some sort of a drug that can cause them death at some point. Think about the children that we're seeing on television that are caught in the wars that are going on today. Think about a starving, hungry child. These are all disturbing issues and problems. But I sincerely believe that there is an answer. There is an answer on how we can help children who are suffering in this manner. Now I'd like to bring it even closer to home. How many of you are frustrated with children who spend way too much time on technology? Well, let me tell you, our grandchildren, the first thing they say is, "Hi, Grandma, where's the iPad?" And the second thing they say is, "What's your password?" Now they don't ask, they've memorized. So there's a real concern. Research in America has shown that in 1 week, in America, teenagers spend over 55 hours in front of a screen. Okay, so how many hours do we have in a week? 168. If they spend 55 hours in front of a screen, and they spend 35 hours in school, and if they sleep about 7 hours, let's say nearly 49 to 50 hours sleeping, doesn't leave much time for any interaction, does it? What we are is a disengaged society. We find more and more the trouble with society is we have a healthy lifespan, but it's what we do with every minute that we're alive. So the question today is, how many children realize that those hours in front of a television screen or a game or even Facebook and Twitter and everything else isn't going to lead to changing or improving their lives for the future? In America, the only positive thing that has happened is children by 8% have become more and more engaged in society. Do you want to hear the negative? 27% of children prefer to be alone. Actually, the increase is 27%. Have preferred to be alone. That's a scary fact. Being alone has many, many side effects. So as you look at this with disengaged families, disengaged society, disengaging from your nation or even internationally and globally, can be a serious problem. So with 83 wars going on, do you blame kids for wanting to be disengaged? How much pain can these young people watch? Now, how can we change the course of the youth today? I happen to believe that there is a solution. And it's a solution you've been hearing about all morning. I kind of felt like my talk would be redundant because you've heard about this. It's engaging students, engaging them in an area where they have a true passion. The solution is a simple formula that I will share with you at the end. And in fact, you've probably seen it in the title of my speech. What I'd like is a quote from a longtime teacher, Janetta Cole, and she says, "An education that teaches you to understand something about the world is half of it." I bet you can guess what the other half is. It's doing something about what you've learned. It's not just memorizing facts. And so often, Whether it's in America or here in Armenia, there are still teachers, you heard that this morning, who believe sheer memorizing of facts is all you need to do to be a learned person. So let's talk about what are some definitions to something we all know and believe in, and that's civic education and civic involvement. Civic education is very simple. It's the knowledge and the skills and the virtue to be a better human being and a better citizen. Do you think Armenia could use that right now? All right, so let's go on to seeing what a 15-year-old in Sacramento just told our Supreme Court Justice. Sharon Dia, an African-American young lady, said that the importance of civic education comes down to one simple belief. It's about human nature. When people know better, they do better. Isn't that simple? So why do we deny people from the right to do better? Knowing better seems to be the easy part of it. It's doing better. The ancient Greeks actually had civic education and knowledge tied down. Paideia is one of the concepts they had. They believed from birth to grave, you needed to be involved in your community, in your family. You needed to be involved in being an excellent citizen. And they combined it with another Greek concept called arete, excellence. They wanted you to be excellent at your involvement. So let's talk about, does education have a role in all of this, specifically in Armenia? How many of you would believe that education in Armenia has a role in preparing civically engaged, civically knowledgeable students? And there is a role. Let me share one sad fact, and this is no matter where you are in the world. The saddest fact is that being civically knowledgeable and engaged is actually tied to the wealth of the family. If you live in poverty communities, there are less opportunities, and this has been researched by the Civic Education Research Institution, Dr. Joe Kahn. If you live in poverty society, chances are you are not being civically engaged. Let's try it. How many of you have driven by the villages of Armenia and seen children sitting around, seeing adults just sitting around? Thank you. What a waste of life. Could they be engaged? What has turned them off? And that's what we're failing to study and understand. How can we bring them back into engagement? Let's talk about where civic engagement begins. It begins at home. If you're civically engaged, and I'm talking to the converted here, you're here because someone, somewhere at home, has either been a great role model for you, or at school there's been a great role model. In America, we like to say the first and best teacher for a child is mother and father. That's it. There's no better teacher in the world. The love that comes from them makes learning absolutely amazing. The next best teacher, of course, happens to be at the school. And today I began to worry a bit about listening to the kinds of teachers our students may be facing here. But an engaged teacher makes a difference. Let me give you an example of this. There's a group of young people in a village on the borders of Armenia that discovered just about 3 weeks ago some Armenian cross stones, khachkars. And they decided that they wanted to save these stones. So they did. They went into an archaeological dig, pulled out the stones, and they were so proud of themselves until a call came from Yerevan telling them they had no right to be vandalizing our historic crosses. Mind you, those crosses have probably been buried there for decades on end. What happened is the kids explained that they not only saved those crosses, of course, principals and teachers got into it, but now they want to create a museum to save those crosses from the environmental issues. Civic learning, civic engagement, you bet. These young people who I spoke with knew more about Armenian cross stones than anyone I know because they cared. And they cared and turned it into engagement by being involved. So now let's talk about where do we find examples? Do you know that all the top universities in America, that includes Harvard, that includes Tufts, that includes Georgetown and UCLA, and at least 3 dozen more, have now a major involving civic engagement and civic learning. The world is awakening to the power of the citizenry. Some of the wonderful things that students are involved with is being a leader and politically making sure people vote. So what is all this good for? It's good because an engaged child will not go to prison. A civically engaged child will not be using drugs. A civically engaged child is a healthier child. And civically engaged children truly contribute to society. Simple? Actually, it's very simple. We've been working with a volunteer group here in Armenia to give scholarships. Children in great need receive 4-year scholarships to pay for their college and university expenses. 5 years ago, when this group made the rule to have volunteering as a must to receive the scholarship, parents and students in Armenia stood up and said, nah, pay me for what I do. We don't work for free here. Just 2 years ago, we had students not only engaged, but telling us how wonderful it is. They were on fire. Just recently, last April 24th, after everyone visited the monument, guess what? The monument was strewn with trash. These 80 young people walked up to the monument, told the janitorial staff, step aside, we're here to help you, and cleaned up the whole monument area. The janitorial staff was amazed and asked, where did you learn this? And they just said, it's a new habit we're developing. So it's doable. It happens right here in Armenia. Why aren't more youth engaged? Honestly, it's the fault of the adults. It's because we think it's too much work. It's not the stand-up, sage-on-stage delivery. It takes some work. It takes some planning. And a good civic engagement program first makes sure that children are interviewed for their passion. What's your passion? As an adult sitting here today, can you pass your passion on in a civic learning and engagement format? Think about it. Have you done this already? There are 6 steps that are absolutely crucial for a good civic engagement project. First, the student understands what the problem is. Second, they do some research on what the solution is. Third, they do some analysis of, do we need to even cure this or solve this problem? 4, if I do this, will it help improve the problem? Then they take action on 5, and 6, they go back post-mortem and say, hey, was any of this even worth doing? Let me ask you a question. How many of you have heard of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge? Raise your hand if you've heard it. How many of you here in Armenia know someone that even stood there and poured ice over their heads? Okay. That was, believe it or not, some sort of civic engagement. You know, Margaret Mead loved to say Never underestimate the power of a small group of people to make a change in this world, because that is all that can. Well, if we're a small group of people and we work together, we can change the world. Pay it forward is a concept that I like. We immigrated from Tehran to the United States when I was age 9. My father insisted on this trip, and I disliked him. I was mad at him because I didn't want to leave my family or our refrigerator. We had just bought a refrigerator. That was very important. No TV, but refrigerator. When we arrived in New York Harbor, my father made me get up at 4 a.m. He wanted me to see someone, and I did. I saw the Statue of Liberty. My father had described her as this beautiful woman who would change my life. And I looked at him and I said, she's not beautiful, she's green, she's a statue, and how in the world is she ever going to change my life? Well, most recently, as you heard, I had the pleasure of returning to the Statue of Liberty. And the reason I received that award was because I had volunteered. And I didn't volunteer knowing the award existed. I didn't even know such an award existed. And I will tell you in my life that volunteering has introduced me to some of the best people in this world. And that's what you need here, is the willingness to volunteer. We were in Artsakh yesterday, and the children told us a story that was amazing. They said, we do volunteering naturally. We have so many people injured in the war that it comes natural to us to volunteer. You don't even have to ask us or give us a scholarship for it. A clergyman, Dr. Lasavik, said, a single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and those roots spring up new trees. So can you imagine if you do one single kindness act, what that will do? How many new kindness acts you will propose in this world with one kindness? So volunteerism isn't the only thing that matters. The other thing that matters is how we change government and society. In civics education, once you become a volunteer, you also become an activist. It's just the natural outgrowth. In Armenia, you've done so much. You fought for transportation not to cost what the government wanted it to cost. You fought against environmental issues, saving parks. You've also reported voting violations. I have a couple of women here in Armenia. They don't even know that I consider them my heroes because they went public when election time voting violations happened. So it's possible to make a change in the world. I close with a thought from President Roosevelt that says, you got to be able to do what you can and what you have with what you have, and right now and right here. I'm so sick and tired of hearing that you can't make a change here, so we'll go to another country. I'd like to suggest to you that President Roosevelt was right. You can make a change. You can do it right here, right now, with what you have. So let's not wait for someone else and somewhere else to make this change. Thank you very much, and I hope that you will consider making a change, because Henrik Ibsen said, 1,000 words won't leave so deep an impression as one kind deed. So do your kind deeds and start today. Thank you.